I'll focus on the implications of naturalism and then give reasons for why certain phenomena, the universe's beginning, fine-tuning, consciousness, rationality, human dignity and morality, even the problem of evil, are far less surprising or shocking if a personal God exists than on naturalism. That is, the context of theism is more natural than naturalism itself and provides a better fit for the disparate phenomena that we take for granted. So I shall proceed with unperturbed pace, deliberate speed, and majestic instancy.
The clip that we're about to watch is Paul Copan's opening statement in the debate that he recently had with Stephen Woodford of the Rationality Rules YouTube channel. The topic of discussion was, is it reasonable to believe in God? And Paul Copan's opening statement was such a withering attack against materialism that I wanted to feature it on this channel and play it through in its entirety. Let's dive in.
How do we define theism and naturalism? Well, theism, I'll give three basic tenets. First, a maximally great worship-worthy being exists. Secondly, that this being created a world a finite time ago, a world that is distinct from God. And thirdly, this God created human beings in God's image with dignity and worth and capacities to use imagination and create the arts and so forth. Naturalism, also three tenets. We can call them three isms. The tenet of materialism. Matter is all the reality that there is. Kai Nielsen, Professor Emeritus, the late Professor Emeritus at the University of Calgary, says naturalism is the view that anything that exists is ultimately composed of physical components. Daniel Dennett, another naturalist of prevailing wisdom in the academy, is materialism. There is only one sort of stuff, namely matter, the physical stuff of physics, chemistry, and physiology, which can explain all phenomena. The second tenet, determinism. All events are determined by prior physical forces going all the way back to the Big Bang. No free will, personal responsibility, moral agency. Our choices are not up to us, but are the result of physical forces over which we have no control, including all that Steve tells you tonight. That he is no more rational than the theist, since neither can help believing or doing what he does. The biologist Francis Crick said that our sense of identity and free will and so forth is nothing more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. Of course, if this is true, his own book, The Astonishing Hypothesis, is nothing more than the product of the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. Thirdly, the third ism is scientism, that science is the only, or best way at least, the best way to know. And so the naturalist Bertrand Russell affirmed, what science cannot discover, mankind cannot know. Problem here, though, how can you scientifically prove that all knowledge must be scientifically provable? This is a philosophical assumption, not the result of scientific research. Thirdly, what are the implications of naturalism? Fundamentally, naturalism undermines all the things that we have understood that make us human. It strips us bare. The naturalist philosopher Jaegwon Kim says naturalism is imperialistic. It demands full coverage and exacts a terribly high ontological price. Bite the bullet. Embrace the starkness of naturalism and don't borrow from a worldview like theism, in other words. The naturalist Hugh Price says that since the 17th century, the regions under threat are some of the most central in human life, and he gives 4 M's. Morality, human dignity, moral duties, objective right and wrong, virtuous character. Modality, being able to choose between options, free will, moral responsibility. Meaning, objective meaning, making sense of it all, associated with purpose and objective identity that human beings have. And then the mental, the self or self-consciousness, the first-person awareness, intentionality, and even life after death. Theism affirms these 4 M's and more, which are central to our humanity. All of these things are not an illusion, but that is what strict naturalists typically claim. In making my case, as I said, I'll call upon a number of leading naturalists to help reinforce my arguments in making the case for theism. This is what is the inference to the best explanation, which hypothesis is more natural, more unifying, more basic, and accounts for the wide range of evidence we have in so many disparate areas. The evidence suggests a transcendent source of vast power, intelligence, supreme value, consciousness, creativity, freedom or agency, and rationality, indicators that suggest personhood and that mind is more fundamental than matter. What are these evidences for God? Well, first of all, the universe's beginning. Matter, which includes quantum particles, which are not eternally existent, energy, space, and time, they began with the universe. The universe is not self-sufficient, which points to a transcendent cause. The noted physicist Paul Davies, after reflecting on the expanding universe, microwave background radiation, the second law of thermodynamics, notes that the universe could not be eternal. The usable energy is dissipating and therefore can't be finite. And so Davies asks, what caused the Big Bang? He says, it seems to me we don't have too much choice. I should say that Davies is a believer in God. He says, but a noted physicist, he says either something, these are the two options, either something outside of the physical world or an event without a cause. William Rowe, a naturalist, late naturalist, says it has to be acknowledged that the Big Bang theory does give credence to some sort of creator. A Big Bang needs a Big Banger. The Nobel Prize-winning physicist Steven Weinberg preferred a beginningless or steady state model of the universe and disliked the Big Bang because it resembled Genesis 1 too much, because it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It appears that the beginning of the universe is our first miracle, as it were, which would then set the context for other possible miracles like the bodily resurrection of Jesus. Secondly, the universe is fine-tuning. If you're a betting person, do you go with naturalism or theism on this? If you're a naturalist, you're trusting, you have faith, that a lot happened without a powerful agent and mind to begin and guide the process to arrive at human beings. Not only do we need a universe, which is not eternal, the universe must have three characteristics in addition. It has to be, first of all, life permitting. As Roger Penrose says, 1 part in 1 times 10 to the 123rd power. Pick a 1 subatomic particle out of the entire universe on the first guess. That is the kind of number that we're talking about. But it gets worse. It also has to be a life-producing universe. If life is produced from non-life, it would, and a lot of people have tried to do this, and it would show that it takes a lot of intelligent planning, but the naturalist biologist Francis Crick called the emergence of life almost a miracle. But it also has to go beyond that. It has to be life-sustaining. That producing a single-celled organism from non-living matter has to go all the way to Homo sapiens, again adding improbability upon improbability and so forth. But given theism, all of this makes excellent sense, as there's an intelligent and powerful being to guide all of this. The theist, Alvin Plantinga, says such fine-tuning is not at all surprising or improbable on theism. God presumably would want there to be life, intelligent life with whom he can communicate and share love. Given atheism, this fine-tuning is surprising. Therefore, theism is to be preferred to atheism. The late British philosopher Antony Flew, probably the most noted atheist of his day, abandoned atheism and embraced belief in God, which he claimed is supported by the most recent scientific discoveries, following the dictum, follow the evidence wherever it leads. And he listed all of these things that I've just talked about. What about consciousness? Michael Lockwood, a materialist or naturalist, confesses that the problems with giving a naturalistic account of moving from brain activity to consciousness is so glaring, and he says, I cannot believe that anyone with philosophical training looking dispassionately at these programs would take any of them seriously for a moment, were it not due to prior commitments to materialism. Colin McGinn, same thing, a philosopher of mind, naturalist. Consciousness seems like a radical novelty in the universe not prefigured by the after effects of the Big Bang. Daniel Dennett cuts to the chase, calling consciousness an illusion. Of course, the problem here is that one has to be conscious to experience an illusion. On theism, however, a supremely self-aware being exists, and then we have a very plausible context for consciousness. But things get worse for the naturalistic perspective, because the mainstream naturalistic view in the academy denies the reality of consciousness, like Daniel Dennett, which means that suffering doesn't exist either. As the Christian philosopher Stuart Getz reminds us, if you think that there is a problem of evil, then you must, if you're consistent, break ranks with contemporary philosophical orthodoxy. There is no problem of evil from the strict naturalist point of view. Daniel Dennett himself confesses that intrinsic human rights is nonsense on stilts, so there can be no violation of anybody's rights. We can talk about personal agency and so forth, but I won't go into a lot of these things here. But rationality is another indicator of a theistic source. Steve does videos for rationality rules, but it seems a problem is here. The naturalist philosopher Alex Rosenberg, in a meeting with other leading naturalists, says it's a dirty little secret that among us naturalist philosophers is giving a naturalistic account of reason. No one chimed in to say, hey, wait a minute, no, we really can in this gathering. The naturalist philosopher of mind, Patricia Churchland, says that the nervous system enables organisms to succeed in the 4 F's: fighting, feeding, fleeing, and reproducing. That is evolutionary advantage. And she says, truth, whatever that is, definitely takes the hindmost. In other words, you may feel you have free will, dignity and worth, moral duties, and so forth. But according to naturalists, these are false beliefs that enhance survival and reproduction. So from a pragmatic point of view, perhaps schools should just teach that humans have intrinsic dignity and moral responsibility and rights in order to enhance survival and reproduction, but not because this is actually true. But for the naturalist, it seems that rationality too would have to be another illusion. Now, theists can readily account for rationality and trusting our rational faculties to lead us to the truth because we've been made in the image of a rational God. We're wired for more than survival and reproduction, but for seeking the truth as well. This God couldn't be evil because this God has generally given to us reliable belief-forming processes. I can talk about objective beauty, that beauty makes sense of a creative transcendent, is made sense of by a transcendent creative mind that is the source of beauty. Scientists appeal to beauty to justify their scientific theories. The naturalist Richard Dawkins, interestingly, observes that the Milky Way and the undulations of the Grand Canyon strata lead Dawkins into a state of almost worship and abstract gratitude. That sounds like a theistic response. We give thanks to persons, but as a naturalist, whom are you going to give thanks to for the Milky Way or the Grand Canyon's beauty? This impulse makes no sense on naturalism. And if this creator were evil, why would this being create such stunning beauty everywhere? Finally, let me say something about objective moral values. Objective morality, including duties, human dignity, human agency, and so forth. On naturalism, actual value, whether human or animal, doesn't exist. We have just evolved certain moral feelings of moral duties, but not actual duties themselves. It's just how we've evolved, and we could have developed a completely different feeling about morality. Charles Darwin said we could have developed hive bee morality, that unattached females would kill their brothers, mothers would kill their fertile daughters. The naturalist Michael Ruse says we could have developed termite morality, that is, dwelling in darkness, eating our waste, and cannibalizing our dead. Michael Ruse says that our awareness of morality, our sense of right and wrong, a feeling of obligation to be thus governed, is merely of biological worth. We think it binding upon us because we think it has an objective status, but morality is merely a corporate illusion that has been fobbed off on us by our genes to get us to cooperate. So on strict naturalism, there's no problem of evil, which is itself a problem, and there's no objective morality, another problem, but this raises other problems. Randy Thornhill and Craig Palmer, biologist and anthropologist, give a naturalistic justification for rape. When males can't find a mate because of their subconscious drive to survive and reproduce, they force themselves upon females, and they assert that rape is a natural phenomenon that's the product of the human evolutionary heritage comparable to the leopard's spots and the giraffe's elongated neck. Now, Julian Baggini notes a problem here. He's a noted atheist, naturalist. He says the more brutal facts of life are harsher for us atheists than they are for those who have a story to tell in which it all works out right in the end, and even the most horrible suffering is part of a mystifying divine plan. If we don't freely admit this, then we've betrayed the commitment to the naked truth that atheism has traditionally embraced. He continues, anyone who thinks it's easy to ground ethics hasn't either done much work in moral philosophy or wasn't concentrating when they did. And he admits that for the theist, at least there is some bedrock belief that gives a reason to believe that morality is real and will prevail. Now, Steve might say, I'll grant you all of these things, but the existence of evil contradicts the existence of a good and powerful God. Maybe there's an evil creator. But how does Steve define evil? Something that goes against how we've arbitrarily evolved? No, evil is a departure from the way things ought to be, not simply the way that we feel things ought to be. For naturalism, there is no way things ought to be. Secondly, even if these reasons I've given are sound, and if the creator happens to be evil, then naturalism is false. Third, people respond to evil differently. This has been called the perspectival problem of evil. Some people turning away from God, but others turning to God because they can't make sense of evil otherwise. For example, in one study, 25% of Nazi concentration camp survivors turned to God, while 11% ultimately abandoned God. My own father turned to God in the face of evil, growing up in Ukraine, and his father died in the forced famine of Stalin called the Holodomor that killed 6 to 10 million Ukrainians. Evil prompted him to turn to God, and he was the most joyful person I've known. So it's simply false to say that people inevitably turn away from God because of evil. Some will, some won't. This is what has been called, like I said, the perspectival problem of evil. Fourth, Why trust your rational, sensory, and moral faculties if the Creator is evil, as I've said? If you do, it seems like you've been made by a good, reliable God rather than an evil one. Let me just finish with this. Every worldview, including naturalism, has to account for evil. Which worldview does the best job of it? Naturalism doesn't have the proper structure in place to do the job. Theism fares much better in this regard, and I know we'll talk about this in a few moments. But as the Christian philosopher Marilyn Adams wrote, if divine goodness is infinite, if intimate relation to it is thus an incommensurable good for created persons, then we have identified a good big enough to defeat horrors in every case. So for these and other reasons, theism has better explanatory resources than naturalism to explain a wide range of features of the universe, as well as those things fundamental to human experience, like those 4 M's. Thank you very much.
Okay, now, like I said, if you guys want to see how Stephen answers some of these attacks, you can do so at Paul Copan's channel. The full video is there. I will say, spoiler alert, there's a lot of questions that don't get answered. There's a lot of objections that don't get rebutted to, but you do get an understanding of what Stephen Woodford's objection against God is. So if you're interested in the whole debate, it's there. I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation. I love when philosophers condense all of their ideas down into these, what I like to call brilliancies, these tightly compacted formation of ideas supported by quotes and in a very digestible manner. See you guys in the next video. Bye.